Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, dear NBB Group stakeholders, and welcome to our investors meeting that is going to demonstrate our financial and non-financial results and accomplishments for the full year of 2022. We are delighted to conduct this meeting after we had recently, and specifically on the 8th of March 2022, produced our detailed Q4 video that demonstrated the group's financial results and the bank's ESG accomplishments, demonstrating our dedication towards maintaining our status as a responsible banking group. Representing NBB Group in this meeting as speakers are the Chief Executive Officer, Jean-Christophe Duran, the Chief Financial Officer, Russell Bennett, the Senior Associate and Sustainability Officer at the Corporate and Institutional Investment Banking Department, Abdulrahim Abdul Hamid. Joining us later in the questions and answers session are the Chief Strategy Officer, Yasser Al-Sharifi, the Chief Human Resources and Sustainability Officer, Dalab Hajji, the Chief Risk Officer, Isa Nasir, the Chief Executive, Corporate and Institutional Investment Banking, Hisham Al-Kurdi, and the Financial Controller, Fatima El-Khoury. My name is Hisham Abul Fath, and I am the head of NBB's Corporate Communications. I'll be the meeting's moderator, and I would like to make the following points before we start. This meeting will be conducted in English language. The presentation of this meeting will be published on Bahrain's Bourse's website in both languages, English and Arabic. Questions are welcome in Arabic and English, and they will be answered in the language asked. So if you ask a question in Arabic, it will be answered in Arabic and vice versa. All questions are welcome, and they are required to be written in the questions section or the chat. So feel free to drop in your questions at any time during the presentation in the chat or in the Q&A section. And any comments are also welcome, and they will also be required to be written in any of those areas. We will now start the investors meeting with the NBB's Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Jean-Christophe Duran. JC, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this investors meeting, which will summarize the performance of the NBB Group during 2021. I would like to highlight a few points which I think are important for investors to know and which will be elaborated in the various presentations. First of all, in a very challenging environment, 2021, NBB has demonstrated once again its resilience, especially in terms of business performance. At a time where interest rates were low, the economy was uncertain, NBB's strengths have been redemonstrated. We have continued, as we had done in 2020, with a prudent provisioning policy to ensure the robustness of the bank in the coming years. I would like to highlight in the performance one specific point is the development of the non-interest income. I think it's important to see that over the years, NBB has built up a capacity to generate fee revenues across the various business lines. Talking about performance, we cannot talk about performance without mentioning the digital journey. As you well know, NBB has gone through a digital transformation over the past 3-4 years. And 2021 has been the year where we launched a new state-of-the-art retail app, part of a broader retail platform, which has been already voted the best retail app in Bahrain. Other points beyond the performance, I think I would like to highlight. You have seen that the report is now a sustainability in financial report. So sustainability is a very important pillar of the NBB strategy. It's been so for the past 2-3 years. It's a journey. We have improved. We have demonstrated our ability to match the best. And it's a topic we take extremely seriously. We have been ranked the first institution in Bahrain, the second in the GCC, and we will continue investing to ensure to maintain our leadership position. Within this ESG, people are important for us. Our staff are important for us. And we were very, very proud to be accredited gold by Investors in People. It's an international organization. It's a transparent process. We are the first institution, the first company to be accredited in Bahrain. And it was a moment of pride, and it reflects the importance we attach to developing our people. The last point is, I've mentioned at the beginning, we are talking about the NBB group. The NBB group, because as it's well known, we have acquired 80% of BASP, an additional 50% 2 years ago. And 2021 really has been the first year of full integration. And I would reassure that it's been going on with success. It's been a good integration, both at the level of the team, business strategy. And today, I can proudly say that in 2021, we have achieved our synergies. We have integrated teams, and we work really as a group. And this is reflected in our performance. So I will not talk longer because my colleagues will go through the various elements which I have highlighted, but I thought it was important to share which direction NBB is going and what is important for the future and the strategy. Ishaq.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe Duran, the CEO of the National Bank of Bahrain. I would now like to welcome the Chief Financial Officer to start this meeting by explaining the group's financial results. Russell Bennett, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to present the results for NBB Group for the full year of 2021. And we'll do that by going through the normal presentation that we share with you each quarter. So let's do that. So onto page 4, and we'll start in the middle of page number 4, and we'll look at the consolidated net profit. Here we can see that the net profit has increased by 8.5% from 50.7 to 55 million in 2021. This translates into 53.9 million dinars of profit attributable to the shareholders of NBB. This impressive result was achieved due to strong combination of net interest income and also the fee income and the fee growth that JC talked about just a moment ago. We start by looking at the left-hand side of the screen. We can see here that net interest income has increased from 3% in 2020 to 3.1% in 2021. And on the right-hand side, we have the fee income growth from 10.4 million to 13.8 million. The fee and commission growth is part of our strategic direction, and this growth of 33% in the year is part of that execution of that plan. If we move on to page number 5, we can see here the full income statement shown graphically. All underlying components of core income are above the equivalents of 2020. This is particularly impressive if we recall that the first quarter of 2020, which is shown in the yellow bars on the screen, was actually a pre-COVID world. So therefore, we're comparing against many months of activity that was prior to interest rate rises. It was prior to the introduction of any CBB fee caps. It was prior to the extraordinary costs associated with keeping our customers and our staff safe during the pandemic. That said, let's go to the left-hand side and we'll work our way through the income statement. So at the far left, we've got the net interest income. The net interest income increased by 4% between the 2 years. This is a combination of balance sheet management as well as loan growth that we'll see shortly. The core other income increased by 33%. This isn't just the fee income. The fee income also increased by 33%. But this includes the other core elements of the business as well. Onto the non-core income. Non-core income decreased by 8.1 million dinars. This is predominantly due to the lower level of recoveries during 2021. We had a lot of recoveries and performed well in 2020, and that was not repeated during 2021, but we do have expectations for ongoing recoveries into 2022. But despite that 8 million reduction in non-core income, our total revenues, our total income is actually up in 2021 compared to 2020. On to operating expenses. Operating expenses are slightly higher, 6% higher than the previous year. primarily due to the costing of the customer-related improvements. So our branches are better, our ATMs are better, we have an award-winning retail digital app, as JC explained at the beginning. We have better risk and treasury systems in place now, and we have a new core banking system in the UAE and in KSA branches. So all those foundations obviously have an immediate cost, and the revenues will follow on in future years. We continue our journey onto the right and we see loan provisions. Loan provisions are 56% lower than in 2020. If you recall, in 2020, we started building up the buffers due to the onset of COVID. Those buffers are still on the balance sheet and they remain with us unutilized. In addition, during 2021, we've continued to be prudent. We've continued to maintain buffers and build those buffers up slightly. We are aware that the loan deferral period has now been extended to June of 2022. So we are making sure that those buffers are in place until the end of that loan deferral period. Other provisions are up by 9.7 million dinars between the 2 years. That 9.7 million dinars is a provision charge taken by our subsidiary, the ISB. Predominantly, it reflects a court case that is currently ongoing in the United States of America. BSB management are hopeful of ultimately reversing elements of this provision back into income, but it's the prudent and the correct action to take immediate and full provisions in the year that we are aware of the situation. So that is a full coverage for that particular event. This then ends in a net profit of 55 million. It's interesting to note that if we were to add back those one-off provisions we just talked about, the net profit would have been a massive 29% up on 2020's results, which highlights the strong fundamentals underpinning the performance of the group. If we then move on to page number 6, we can then look at the cost of risk, which is the loan provision charges. On the left-hand side, the loan provision charges for 2020 stood at 121 basis points, 1.21%. That has dropped significantly, and we're now back into the normal corridor. NBB's normal corridor is between 35 and 50 basis points. So we're at the top end of that normal corridor, the slight increase representing our prudent stance and making sure that the provisions are there until the end of the loan deferral period in June of 2022. That can be demonstrated by looking at the right-hand side, where we've got the coverage ratios. This shows us for the whole loan book, the various different stages of maturity of the loan book, what the percentage coverage is that is available. The stage 3, which is the non-performing loans, including collateral, and this is high quality collateral, covers 92% of the gross outstanding. So a very strong coverage ratio indeed. If we move on to page number 7, which then looks at our key performance ratios. On the left-hand side, we are showing the return on equity. Return on equity increased to 10.5%. That's an increase of 4% over 2020. In the centre, ROA shows that we've remained at 1.2% for the return on assets. And on the right-hand side, we can see the cost to income ratio. The cost to income ratio increased to 49%, and this is an area of focus, ongoing focus for management. The reasons for that are, as we mentioned with the expenses, the cost of the transformation shows itself in depreciation charges, shows itself in the cost of the digital expansion that we are performing within the group. That cost is immediate and the revenues will then follow on in the future. So there is expectation that 49% would start to decrease. We then move on to page number 8 and we can look at the balance sheet. We start with the assets on the left-hand side, and if we go to the far left, we can see the liquid assets. The liquid assets are things such as placements, T-bills and cash. It has fallen in total terms by 8% at the point in time of 31st of December versus 31st December 2020. However, NBB and the group as an institution is still very liquid, with 14% of our assets in liquid assets, so placements and T-bills, etc. Onto the loan book. The loan book has increased by 10% between the 2 year ends. That is now at 2.4 billion dinars. That growth has been reflected across all the portfolios within the group. And on the right-hand side in the centre of the screen, total assets are up by 4% to 4.5 billion dinars. We continue to the right-hand side. We are showing the liabilities and equity. Liabilities are up by 3%, despite of what it says on the chart, are up by 3% year on year, and equities are up by 2%. We'll look at more details on the customer deposits in the next slide. So now what we're doing with the funding here is we're splitting up that customer deposits into demand deposits and time and call deposit, i.e. the short term and the long term deposits. The group continues to see or be an attractive destination for depositors. This attraction further developed during the release of the new retail banking app that rolled out during 2021. Consequently, demand deposits are up by 8% to 1.9 billion during 2021. And on the right-hand side, these are the longer-term time and call deposits. They were maintained within the 1.3 billion range, and we continue to attract new diversified sources of long-term funding. And you'll see these coming on board during 2022. And this is the final page from me, and it provides insight into the main regulatory ratios, all of which are very strong. On the left-hand side, the NPL ratio represents an historic low ratio for NBB at 4%. The CAR, or the capital adequacy ratio, remained at 22.1%. Again, a very high ratio for the regulator and also in comparison to our peers. And on the far right-hand side, we have the two liquidity ratios. The LCR is the short-term ratio and the NSFR, the longer-term ratio, both of which are fundamentally above the 100% requirement from the central bank and are very firmly under control and very strong indeed. And with that, Hisham, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much, Russell Bennett, the Chief Financial Officer of NBB Group. I would now like to welcome the Senior Associate and Sustainability Officer at the Corporate and Institutional Investment Banking Department to take us through the bank's non-financial updates and accomplishments. Abdulrahim Abdul Hamid, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Hisham. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining this investors update. I'm going to take you through the sustainability journey at NBB in the year 2021. What we see in front of us here and the sustainability journey, the way it translates into a 3-year roadmap. And that 3-year roadmap focuses on the infrastructure, building the right infrastructure in place to drive progress and integration forward. And then in year 2, we're going to look at building the right momentum. And finally, looking at reaching our goal, which is stakeholders inclusivity. Going through the next slide, what we look at here is the infrastructure. And when we look at the way things are built in NBB for the infrastructure year is starting at building the right framework, a framework that translates and drives forward what we're trying to achieve. And that gets the commitment of the board committee at the highest level of governance. Then from there, we cascade down into KPIs and objectives that are for different functions and departments within the bank. All that while taking in consideration that the importance of inclusivity through awareness of our employees. The next slide, please. And then when we look at transparency in NBB, last year, NBB issued its first integrated annual report, which looks into integrating the non-financial and the financial aspects of the bank. It's very important for us to have showcase such report because it focuses and reflects the value creation through the interplay between the two elements. Next slide, please. And as stated earlier, the commitment comes from the very high level of governance at the bank, which is the NRGS committee. And at this point in time, the sustainability oversight and responsibilities sits within the NRGS mandate. Also, we've created a committee at the management level. It's a well-diversified and well-balanced committee from both genders. And there are different responsibilities that are showcased there. We are looking at monitoring the performance in the bank, providing the necessary assistance for the various functions and employees that are taking ESG initiatives. We are obviously focusing on awareness. It's key in showcasing and taking the way forward in the right manner. And then we're also the committee itself is keeping an eye on the different market developments that are taking place. We're setting in the committee the pathway forward to maintain alignment with the 3-year roadmap and ensuring that any required updates find its place subject to the market conditions that we find ourselves in. And then finally, ESG reporting. It's about transparency, and it's about showcasing what we do to our stakeholders. And that's the final responsibility within the committee. Next slide, please. And it is of no surprise that awareness is key for any organization when it looks at embarking at such a journey. And awareness for us is key on two fronts, internal and external. And that's why in 2021, we've established an awareness campaign that focused not just on our employees internally, which included a lot of awareness and focus training areas, but also externally to our clients. And we've done that through our two business lines that we've had, the retail, which have embedded different ESG-driven products and services, as well as providing financial literacy through our retail and commercial SME business functions for our clients. Next slide, please. Our commitment to ESG is across all the pillars of the space or the domain. And accordingly, we found it very important and aligned with the overall commitment that we focus also on the environmental footprint and the way we should equally split our attention there. Accordingly, NBB has established its environmental management system, but not only that, we've got it certified by an international standard, which is the ISO 14000 certification. Excuse me. When we look at our community investment, in the year 2021, the total community investments rounded up to 4.1 million Bahraini dinars. And those amounts were invested across the key pillars of the community, including education, healthcare, social welfare, development programs, diversity and inclusion, as well as youth and national sports. And there are different initiatives. If we were to showcase a few examples on the next slide, on slide 20, we can see that, if we can move to the next slide, please. We can see that one of the key initiatives that we've had in the year 2020 is the construction and refurbishment of the Khalifa City Healthcare Center, as well as having donations leading to leading hospitals in the country, such as the Salmaniya Hospital and the PDF. And then on the cultural side, we've had donations to various social centers as well as libraries. Next slide, please. NBB's non-financial performance when it comes to the ESG domain has been recognized by a number of rating agencies, external parties that acknowledge the performance of NBB. And on the local side, ESG Invest is one of them. ESG Invest has ranked NBB the first in the banking sector in Bahrain and the second cross sectors in Bahrain overall for the second year in a row. And when we look at regional ranking, we look at Refinitiv, who places NBB second regionally. Next slide, please. Recognitions by rating agencies were not the only ones that NBB has managed to accomplish in the year, but also we've received awards and accreditations by various different parties that's showcased on the slides. It shows some of these awards showcases NBB's resilience when it comes to the governance aspects, as well as including Sustainability Transparency Award by the Global Finance, as well as showcasing NBB's attention towards human capital sustainability. And that has been achieved through the accreditation received by investors and people, achieving the gold accreditation tier. Thank you very much. I would hand over back to Hisham at this point in time.
Thank you very much, Abdurrahim, the Senior Associate and Sustainability Officer at the Corporate and Institutional Investment Banking Department. Thank you very much for the insights. Joining us now from NBB Group for the questions and answer sessions are the Chief Strategy Officer, Yasser Sharifi, the Chief Human Resources and Sustainability Officer, Dan Abuhajji, the Chief Risk Officer, Isa Masih, the Chief Executive Corporate and Institutional Investment Banking, Hisham Al-Kurdi, and the Financial Controller, Fatma Al-Kohaji. Yasser, Dana, Isa, Hisham, and Fatma, I kindly request you to switch on your cameras, which I think you already did. So thank you very much for that. So we will start off the Q&A with a list of questions that I've received from our shareholder, Ali Al-Tarif. Whilst the RSLs are greater than the RSAs, which cause a negative gap in the table on page 50, note 35, thus it will result in a negative impact on the NII if the IR goes up by 200 basis points. Can you please clarify why NBB is in this situation, which is opposite to the position of its peers? Isa Masih, Abdullah, I think this is a question that relates to you. Chief Risk
Assalamu
Officer.
alaikum. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Hisham, for the introduction, and thank you, Ukhuy Ali, for your timely questions. Now, the approach we've adopted to managing our balance sheet gaps has been more of a dynamic one, where controls have been put in place in the form of RSA to RSL ratios, the rate-sensitive assets to rate-sensitive liabilities, in order to be able to limit the impact of the unexpected and unforeseen fluctuations in interest rates. In particular, I mean, it's important for us to note that the gaps in the short to medium tenors do fluctuate based on the liquidity and funding needs of the group. Therefore, we don't really have a structural negative gap in our balance sheets. And if we look at the December 2021 position as disclosed in the notes for financials, whilst the on-balance sheet position does indeed, as noted, reflect a negative gap in the first two buckets, the position is positive once the off-balance sheet IRS exposures are taken into consideration. I hope that sheds a bit of light to your first question, Ali.
Thank you very much. I believe, Isa, the second question also relates to you and probably a bit of Russell as well, in the financial aspect, which is what is the impact of 200 basis points increase in the IR on the economic value of equity, and where can we see it in the financial statements 2021?
Okay. We don't currently publicly report the impact of interest rate movements on the group's EVE, the economic value of equity. And the publication is restricted to the NII, the net interest income sensitivity. However, we do analyze the interest rate impact on the EVE and report it to the regulator as per the interest rate risk in the banking book, the IRBB methodology, which is part of our semi-annual stress testing submission to CBB. In addition, we do monitor on a daily basis the impact of interest rates on our bond portfolio. Now, if we look at note 36 of the financials, we can see that the overall impact of a 200 basis point parallel shift is relatively limited and almost flat as of year-end 2021.
Okay, thank you very much, Isa.
If I may add,
yes, go ahead, Hisham.
The fact that we're going from a LIBOR curve to a SOFR curve, actually it has a positive impact on the EVE, on the equity of the bank, because you are discounting at a lower interest rate curve. So it should be positive for the bank's EVE.
Thank you very much, Khalid. Allah yatik al-afiyah. Question number 3 from Mr. Ali Tarif. JC, I believe this is a question coming your way, CEO of National Bank of Bahrain. Is NBB envisaging to become the first Bahraini and GCC bank to join the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials, PCAF, furthering the bank's strategy to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2060?
Yes. Thank you for the question, Ali. Certainly it reflects our interest in ESG and particularly the environment part of ESG. Now, I want to answer something, I would say you will find it maybe a bit general, but if you look, if I'm not mistaken, the banks which are part of this program are generally global banks. You will not find, and you mentioned that would be the first, so you imply that there are no other banks in Bahrain in the GCC, which is true. And most of the banks which are listed, and over 100 banks, are mostly Europe, bit the US and Japan. So it is certainly something which we need to keep on the radar as we grow, as we have more diversification. But obviously, in view of our size today, our, I would say, geographic spread, it's a bit premature to give you a precise answer. But all elements which in the future can help us to improve and to contribute to the environmental side will be taken into consideration.
Thank you very much, JC. Question from Zoe Buckingham. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Hello, my name is Zoe Buckingham, an international marketing consultant who supported the foundation of the ADGM Academy. The briefing is very impressive with a dynamic digitalization strategy. I really like the way that NBB is finding so many channels to serve its customers. In your training program for Bahraini nationals, you say that 25 out of 60 candidates are offered roles at the end of the program. Can I ask what qualities and attributes enable young Bahrainis to be successful? Dana Bahajji, our Chief Human Resources and Sustainability Officer, I believe this is a question for you to take up live, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Hisham, and thanks, Zoe, for the question. At NBB, we believe, obviously, in giving back to the community, and investing in youth is definitely one of our main objectives. So we do host a number of integrated, structured internship programs across our various functions. What we do is in our screening for those candidates, we look at academic performance, and we also look at command of English language, simply because within the banking industry, it is very important for us to always continuously develop and grow and train, and usually such trainings are provided in English. So this is what we look at when we screen those candidates into the program. Now, they serve the internship program, and during which we offer them not only on-the-job training, which is typically included in most internship programs across the nation, but we also look at offering them training and assessment opportunities in areas that we believe are important in banking. So we offer them trainings around financial crime, cybersecurity, financial advisory, sustainability, and more recently introduced data literacy. So for those who have performed really well on the job and have demonstrated a good alignment and fit to our culture at NBB, and have shown strength in the areas that I've highlighted, those typically are the ones that we extend full-time employment to.
Thank you very much, Dana. Question from Khalid El-Marzouki, which I believe could come your way, Yasser Sharifi, our Chief Strategy Officer. And Dana, it could come your way as well on the second part of the question. So let's start with Yasser. The question from Khalid El-Marzouki says, great presentation indeed, especially the sustainability ESG part. Is NBB ready, and how will it react to competition from open finance, digital, a challenger, neobanks, crowdfunding, but now buy now, pay later, and big tech FANG? And I'll save the second question after Yasser is done with his first part.
Thank you, Hisham, and thank you, Khalid, for the question. Good afternoon, everyone. As you will be aware, NBB had established digitalization as part of its pillars for the first 3-year strategic plan, which went from 2018 to 2020. A result of that was the launch of our retail digital app, which was referenced in the presentation earlier. The design and delivery of that was dependent on revisiting and redesigning the whole tech stack at NBB in order to enable us to meet the challenges of the new wave of industry. And the approach that we've taken is one of collaboration. So the platform approach adopted allows us to work with different collaborators from the fintech space in order for us to be able to continue to serve our customers in the best way possible. In terms of convergence, that is something that, as you see, has continued to happen, with new players being licensed not only in Bahrain, but across the region. And that actually just makes us challenge ourselves to be better at delivering the services that are expected. And you're going to see some more features coming up in our upcoming plans during 22 and 23. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yasser. Let's go to the second part of the question, which is actually Isa's part, not Dana, because it talks about data privacy. Well, I read it as financial literacy, so forgive me for that. Thank you, Yasser. Second question, can you let us know about NBB's latest initiatives towards data privacy and cyber security management? Two hot topics and always elephants in the room to be discussed nowadays with banks, financial institutions, and telecoms. Isa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor. Now, obviously, with PDPL, data privacy is a hot topic, and the legislation is in place, and it's an ongoing investment. Similarly, with cybersecurity, it's a continuous journey. I mean, we continue to invest in the infrastructure. We continue to invest in the perimeter security tools. We look into the overall environment internally, the external threats. So we always have a continuous program which focuses on both the infrastructure investments as well as the continuous and ongoing awareness. Now, with both of these components, awareness plays a crucial role, and hence our emphasis has to be twofold, both on the development in terms of the investment in the tools and systems, as well as the investment in our people and the awareness programs of all our stakeholders. So yes, I mean, it's an ongoing journey which is effectively never ending.
Thank you, Abdullah. Question to our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Russell Bennett. Why the EPS in the comparative or previous figure is always presented after the adjustment of any capital increase, between brackets, bonus shares, while the current year EPS is always presented prior to this kind of corporate action? Wouldn't it be more accurate to disclose both EPS before and after the bonus for accurate year-on-year comparison? Russell?
Okay, interesting question. I think taking to the last bit of your statement, it is performed the way we do it because we want to have an accurate comparison year on year. So what we do is restate the previous year's comparatives as if the number of shares outstanding this year has been the same for the previous years as well. The reason we do that is that if we issue more shares through a bonus issue, there's more shares, which means there's more earnings to go to those shares. We have to then backdate that transaction into the previous years to make sure that it is a like-for-like transaction. If we didn't do that, then what we'll be comparing against wouldn't be fair, wouldn't be apples against apples. So we do this specifically to make it fair. And also it's a requirement under IS 33 of the IFRS standards. We are dictated to adjust based on bonus issues and capital instruments that were issued in the current year. So it's a regulatory requirement and it's the fair thing to do.
Thank you very much, Russell. And by the way, this was a question from Mohammed Al-Houri, who I forgot to mention his name. Thank you, Mohammed Al-Houri, for your question. One more question coming your way, Russell, since you're on the screen and highlighted. We say improved NPL at 4% in year 2021 versus 5.1% in 2020. But how did you manage to improve it? What were the main drivers behind this improvement? Please shed some light on the net write-off, recoveries, and the write-back.
Okay, yes, there's a couple of elements go into the ratio. So net performing loans is your gross non-performing loans against your gross loan book. So one element that would increase that ratio is an increasing loan book. So as we saw in the financial presentation, our loan book itself has gone up by 10%. So one angle is that as the loan book grows, naturally that ratio as a percentage of your total financing portfolio would go down. The second element is NBB is a very conservative organisation. At first sight of a loan that we feel is not going to pay back in a timely way or in a full capacity would be written off. So if we remove those assets from our NPL ratio and from our balance sheet, they no longer feature and bring down the NPL ratio. The consequence here is the coverage ratio. So obviously it makes the NPL ratio better, but it then brings down or decreases the coverage ratio because you're removing a high percentage provisioned asset. And the third way, as you mentioned, we would restructure facilities as well. So if we restructure facilities and we have a financial restructuring department within NBB and looking after the group, as we restructure and help our clients improve their cash flows and match their cash flows against their loans, then those items will move out of the NPL portfolio and back into the performing book. So it's a combination of many factors.
Thank you very much. And this was a question asked by Mr. Ahmed Fakhro. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed Fakhro. Ya'tik alf afiyah. Question coming your way, JC, in the second part. Okay, so first part for you, Russell, second part for JC, or JC could pick up both. It's up to you. Ahmed Al-Alawi asks, congratulations on your 2021 financial results and impressive sustainability ESG reporting. I have two questions. By the way, this is the second time we've got compliments of the sustainability way. Russell, we've got to wait for some figures next time for the presentation. So my first question is about the impact of VAT on the bank and its clients. Would you like to take that, Russell?
Yes, that sounds like something that I should take. Right, so unlike most corporates, VAT is not just a cash flow transaction. So in most corporates, you charge and you claim back the VAT, and it's just timing difference on your cash flows. For a bank, we are not allowed to claim back all the VAT. I won't go into the reasons why, but the buck stops with us in many cases for the VAT. So NBB does, as with all banks, does suffer the cost of VAT. One of the reasons our cost to income ratio stood up in the last couple of years is because now we're carrying a 5% last year and now a 10% VAT charge on everything we spend. So every element of transformation of spend, except the salary related, is generally covered with VAT. About 85% of that VAT cost is borne by the bank. We can't claim it back. So it is a true cost to the organisation.
Thank you very much, Russell. The second part of the question is actually could be picked up by the CEO or the Chief Strategy Officer, or both. The second question is, how is the overseas operations doing? KSA and UAE branches? Very general questions, how are they doing? So I don't know, Yasser, between yourself or JC, would you like to take that? Was it?
Yeah, so our approach to the overseas markets obviously was quite prudent, and considering the challenges that all the businesses had faced with the COVID pandemic. We have continued to see healthy and steady growth in the business pipeline in both markets. And we've continued to invest in the teams at both operations, reflecting the commitment of the bank towards what we believe is future growth for the institution, unlocking the gateway and the corridor business between the three strategically partnered countries. And you will be hearing soon about the opening of our Dubai branch, adding our presence and commitment to our clients on the ground, and further contribution from the businesses towards the bottom line going forward.
Thank you very much, Yasser. JC, I saw you opened your mic. Is there any further comment that you'd like to make from your side?
No, I think generally, obviously, it's an important strategic direction for the bank. We are blessed with licenses in countries of importance, Saudi Arabia and UAE, and it's the bank's strategy and intentions, as Yasser mentioned, to make our penetration in this country more relevant in the future. I will also add that we also be looking at other countries in the Gulf, not with a local presence, and that's a complement to the question. But NBB has been quite active in Oman in particular, but other GCC countries over the past 2-3 years. So we look at the GCC as really an area of expansion.
Thank you very much, JC and Yasser. This was Ahmed Al-Alawi asking the question, so thank you very much. I've got one more question for Mr. Ali Tarif and 3 more questions to go. Let me start with Mohammed Al-Houri. Question number 1. It says, return on risk-weighted assets, RORWA, as per my calculation, stood at 2.3% in year 2021 versus 2.7% in year 2020, whereas the return on asset was stagnant at 1.2% for 2 consecutive years. Russell, definitely coming your way. My question, while NBB could not improve the ROA, why did the RORWA deteriorate? Isn't this a serious concern for the management, or this would be the bank new normalized level? If it is not, then what is your target? So a couple of questions. Let's start with you addressing them one by one.
Yes, okay, thanks, Hisham. Right, I think as was demonstrated in the financial element in the presentation, the return or the net profit for the organisation was lower than it otherwise would have been due to the existence of additional provisioning. So those provisions were coming through, as I mentioned, BISB and the legal case, and they took full coverage of the potential provisions that could develop. We've also been very prudent as an organisation and maintained a high level of provisioning because of the loan deferral being extended until June 2022. As a consequence of that, the return element in any return ratio calculation, the return element would be lower. So I don't think you can use 2021 as the benchmark year to determine what is the new ratio expected from NBB. We had some precautionary provisions, we had some exceptional provisions, which all depressed return ratios, whether it be ROA, ROE, the return on the risk-weighted assets, whatever you want to look at. So I think we can't reach too many conclusions from the results from 2021 in that respect.
Thank you very much. Okay. Also not live from there. Question from Mr. Ali Al-Tarif, which was, there are, Isa, I think this is your way because we missed you for the last 7 minutes. You didn't appear on screen. So there are 109 Equator Principles financial institutions across 38 countries, including a bank in Bahrain. Is it NBB? If yes, great. If not, are you planning to join and when?
No, I mean, it's not NBB, Ali, but the Equator Principles is on our radar. I can tell you that. Now, our immediate attention is on developing a much broader ESG framework and toolkit. And this particular toolkit goes beyond project finance and aimed at assessing the overall ESG performance across our client base. The framework itself would also include, however, certain components of the Equator Principles. But no, it's not NBB, but it remains on our radar.
Thank you very much, Abdullah. Thank you, Isa. So 2 more questions to go. Actually, oh yes, I'm looking at the answer one. Yes, 2 more questions to go. So let's save the ESG achievements to the last. Question saying from Ahmed Al-Mahmoud. Inshallah, I pronounce your name correctly. Ahmed Al-Mahmoud. Thank you for taking my question and great presentation. Indeed, both Russell and Abdurrahim/Dana. My first question is, CBB successfully launched the first phase of the Bahrain OBF, if I'm not mistaken, and I hope you're referring to the Open Banking Framework in May 2020. Was it favorable for NBB? Plus, is NBB ready to implement the requirements for the second phase of the framework by 30 June 2020? Yasser Al-Sharifi, question directed to you.
Yep. Thank you for that question. Obviously, we welcomed the CBB's progressive stance towards the space, and we were the first to be open banking compliant as a bank, and the first to even offer the aggregation service across the MENA region. And we've been working closely with the team to ensure that we're going to be ready for the second wave of the framework. And as you'll see from our new features that we're going to be launching with our digital propositions, that open banking provide the strategic rails that enable those to take shape. Thank you.
Thank you, Muzid. The second question, JC, I believe this is a question that you could take up. My second question from Ahmed Al-Mahmoud says, if I may, NBB being a leading bank in the Kingdom of Bahrain, we are sure that it supports clients in vulnerable situations via fair treatment. What are the protocols for taking practical action on vulnerability?
I would like to start by saying that we are treating all our clients with fair treatment. That's the basis of our action with clients. Importantly, certainly this crisis has created situations where clients were more vulnerable than in the past. You are talking about protocol. I think it's more a question of being close to your clients. Clients which are vulnerable, whether it's individuals, whether it's small companies, whether it's linked to COVID or otherwise, have always been, I would say, at the center of the action of our teams. So The idea is to anticipate, to support, to advise, and not to wait till the situation has become dire. So I wouldn't use the word protocol. I would use the word tailor-made solutions for the clients which are vulnerable. And there is no client which is vulnerable which we leave on the side of the road. There is a strong commitment to our relationship manager, retail bankers, and so on, to be close to the clients at any time, and to find solutions. I think the idea is to find solutions.
Thank you very much, NBB CEO Jean-Christophe Duran. The last question is coming from Mr. Ahmed Fakhro. Mr. Ahmed Fakhro asks the following: NBB ESG achievements so far are impressive. So why don't you post it on your webpage as an independent report, since the program itself is very dynamic, because the goals keep moving. We do have a sustainability page, by the way, or a landing page on the website, which we worked on last year, but I understand where you're going. However, let Dana do most of the talking on the sustainability, because I'm sure we can never have enough of sustainability, all of us. Don't you think it is now the right time to divorce it from the financial results and publish it online on more regular basis, let's say every month? Dana?
Thank you, Hisham. Yes, Mr. Fakhro, thank you very much for always expressing a lot of interest in sustainability and in NBB's direction, and always offering us opportunities to or ideas on how to improve. I want to start off by saying that I think we're aligned in our thinking, because we agree that continuous reporting is definitely something that is beneficial. And for that reason, as highlighted earlier, NBB has invested in multiple channels of reporting, catering for different angles. So if we are talking about timely reporting, then absolutely right, Hisham. That's why we actually introduced the sustainability page on our website, to enable us to update our stakeholders with all and every new sustainability achievement as and when it happens. So at times we go even beyond or more frequent than monthly reporting. So we use the website to enable us to communicate in this manner. As you've seen, the video also is an aggregate on a quarterly basis that sums up the achievements of every quarter and demonstrates it in a concise manner. So that's another channel. Now we want to maintain the integrated format of our annual report, simply because it is a true showcase of the degree of interplay that we believe in and commit to in both financial and non-financial aspects. So what we're trying to say through that integrated report is that we believe that the performance of the organization is a lot more solid, not only because of the financial aspect, but because of the non-financial aspect that contributes to that solidity and resilience. And for that, we believe it also serves a different and important angle to continuously keep. So we hope that you keep an eye out for the updates that we showcase on our website on a more regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dana. And with that, I don't see any more questions or comments being made from all the stakeholders who are on this call. So allow me to once again thank my colleagues and speakers on this session: Jean-Christophe Duran, the CEO, Sir Russell Bennett, Abdulrahim Abdulhamid, Yasser Al-Sharifi, Dara Buhijji, Isa Masih, Hisham Al-Kurdi, Fatma Al-Kohiji. And until we meet again in the next update, allow me to express our collective gratitude for your continued support and great questions that show how much you actually genuinely have NBB too close to your heart. So thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ma'as-salam.
Thank you.